Hello everyone, welcome back to Illustrator Life. My name is Mark Wayne Adams, and today we are going to be talking about how to price your artwork for children's book illustrations. In previous episodes, I requested that you guys work on a business plan. If you have not created that yet, it's very important that you finish. This is just a very simple business plan. Write it down in your sketchbook because we're going to be referencing that plan throughout the year. And knowing how much you need to make each year is very important in this business. Even in pricing your artwork. Now, the second thing I asked you guys to do was to pick a genre that you would enjoy illustrating in. I set to list 3 of those genres, and today we are going to be talking about children's books, picture books, as our example. So I have a copy of the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook here. If you do not have a copy, we'll be using this throughout the year. You can purchase a copy. There are links on my website, or you can actually request it at your local library and use it as a reference tool after each episode. So today I've turned to the section on comparative fees for children's book illustrations. And I looked at this whenever I first started in this business, and it got me super excited because it says the average illustrator makes anywhere between $7,000 and $40,000 per contract as an advance. So when I saw that figure, I was like, oh yes! This is what I've been looking for. This is what I want to make. And then I also saw that the average illustrator would get paid anywhere from 3 to 5% royalties based on the book sales. And I got really excited because I expected my authors to sell thousands of books every year. And that would be income I would make on top of the royalty advance. So today we're going to be talking about a baseline price that is the least amount that you would charge as an illustrator. And then we're going to talk about a royalty contract and talking about royalty percentages and how to formulate a base royalty contract to work from. Now, the first thing that you need to realize is every illustrator gets paid something different, and every book contract is going to be different. So we're going to talk a little bit about a base, and you can build from this based on this simple formula. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is the base formula, and it starts with how much are you getting paid at your day job. So at the time, I was working as an art director, and I averaged out my number of hours I worked. Sometimes it was 40, sometimes it was 60. So I averaged out the hours that I worked each year for my annual salary and divided that, and it came up with around $15 an hour I was getting paid. That included the overtime. Some of you may get paid overtime, and you may use your overtime hours as your base pay. So I'm going to use $15 as our example. If you are working part-time or you are getting paid minimum wage, for example, you may be in college or high school and you are making a certain pay. If you're making $8 an hour for minimum wage, that's your base pay. That's what you're going to get paid whether you are working your job or if you are illustrating a book. So my base pay is $15 for this example. Now, the next thing you need to know is how much time is it going to take for you to illustrate your book. Now, every illustrator has a certain way they work. Whenever I work, I have 3 stages whenever I'm creating the artwork for my clients. My first stage is I do little thumbnail sketches in my sketchbook. I will either take pictures with my smartphone and send them to the client, or a lot of times I like to scan them in and marry it with the text from the book. That way the client can see how much space is needed on the page for the text and how much is needed for the art. Now, creating those little sketches and scanning it in to send the proof to the client per illustration usually takes me anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. It just depends on the project and where the ideas are coming from. So $15 times 2 hours is $30. I have $30 invested in this illustration, and we haven't even completed it yet. So this is where it's important to know what your base pay is and the number of hours you're going to work on the illustration. Now I told you I have 3 stages. The second stage, after the author has approved the little thumbnail, I go back and if it's a watercolor illustration, I pencil in the illustration on a sheet of watercolor paper, scan it in, marry it with the text, and send another proof back to the author. And that will take probably another 2 hours as well. So now we are at 4 hours invested in my illustration, and we are at $60 for this illustration. Now the last stage in my process is the color stage. Once the author has approved the illustration, the pencil sketch, I will go in and do the watercolor. And watercolor takes me anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, but I also include the fact that I scan the artwork in, I clean it up, and then I also marry it with the text again in a proof so that the author will be able to see the final illustration. So that's another 4 hours. So if we were to take a single illustration and the amount of time that I've invested, it's approximately 8 hours. So 8 times 15 is $120 that I've invested in this illustration. So I call that my base price. That is the least amount that I would need to be paid per illustration if I were to illustrate a book for someone. Now, they don't own the illustration. I have written my contract, so it's a licensed contract. So they can license this artwork for one use, and it's just for a hard copy book. Many children's books may not be in paperback. They may not be in an ebook format. So most authors, they're only just needing the artwork for one use. So $120 a page for one use is what I would charge. Now, the next thing you need to consider in your base pricing is how many illustrations on average would you do to illustrate a book. So I have a copy of a children's book here. It's called Jilly That's Silly. It's about all silly things, all the silly things girls do. And inside the book, there are 36 pages, but there are not 36 illustrations. So inside the book, what I have here is an example. This is a spread illustration. It goes across 2 pages. As an illustrator, I charge one fee for that illustration because it's going to take me about 8 hours to complete that illustration. It's not super detailed, but I still charge as one illustration. Now, if I flip the page, we have 2 separate illustrations. As an illustrator, I would charge one fee for this illustration and one fee for this illustration because these are illustrations, and out of these 4 pages, we have 3 illustrations. Now that's why it's important to understand when someone asks you to illustrate their book, if they say it is 32 pages, you ask them if it's pages or if it's illustrations. Now in a children's book, on average, most children's books are 32 pages, and they're usually around 28 or 29 illustrations, depending on spreads and spot illustrations. Also, you have your cover illustration, back cover artwork, and sometimes you have end sheet artwork. So it's very important to know what you're pricing whenever you are creating your baseline. Now, today we're going to use the example of 30 illustrations. And so 30 illustrations times $120 per illustration works out to $3,600 as our base contract. So now this is a really easy formula that we've created. It is first hourly rate times number of hours you're going to work. So then you'll come out with the illustration price, and then it's that illustration price times the number of illustrations to complete the book. So if you are someone who makes $10 an hour, that's your base, and you invest 8 hours in your illustration, you are going to get paid $80 an illustration. Now, if there are 30 illustrations in your book, 30 times 80 is $2,400. So that would be your base for a one-time usage. It's a really easy formula, and once you learn how to use it, as you become more advanced, you can adjust the formula and charge more for your artwork, and it's easy to do it in your head. Now, the second thing we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about royalty illustrations. Now that is more along the lines of what I quoted from the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook. It is an advance up front and then a royalty percentage on top of that. And what I usually do when I first started out was I used that baseline to develop a base royalty contract for my authors. Now I did this so that if someone came to me and they had more usage that they wanted from the artwork, that I could charge them a little bit more and then a royalty on top of that. So what I did was I took my base price, which in our example is $120 per illustration, and I asked the publishers, how much rights do you want to this artwork? And usually they had 4 usages that were most important to them. The first one was they wanted hardback book rights. Then they wanted paperback. Then they wanted ebook. And then also licensed products, for example, like coloring books. So what I did was I took my base price, I multiplied it times 4 and rounded it up to an even number. And the reason I rounded it up is I'm no mathematician. It was just something that I figured if I round it up and make it easy, it would be something that I could multiply in my head when I'm quoting it to a publisher. So 4 times 120 was $480, and I rounded it up to 500 to make it easy. Always round up, don't round down, because remember, this is a base price. And it gives you a little bit of flexibility if you were to decide to knock up a few dollars to get the contract in your bid. Now, so $500 times 30 illustration works out to around $15,000 as an advance. Most publishers that I have ever worked with look at that and say, we do not have that in the budget. Many of the publishers I work with range from indie publishers all the way to traditional publishers, but most of them want to get the artwork as cheap as they can so that they can meet a budget. Now, $15,000 falls in that little window of the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook of the amount that most people should be getting paid. So I looked at the contract and I thought, you know what? I'll make my contracts where I will make a larger royalty and I will charge a smaller advance. And the reason I did that was because when the publisher is publishing a book, and if they make it cost effective, you will get a higher royalty on the book sales. So for me, I was using some of my business experience and thought, all right, this is the way we'll do this. So in my royalty contract, what I did was I made a simple formula, and it goes like this. I take the original artwork price per piece, multiply it by the number of illustrations in the book. So this would be 30 illustrations, $15,000, and then I multiply it by 25%. So I have them put a 25% deposit down on the contract. That would be my advance. So 25% of $15,000 is $3,750. Now that is my royalty advance. That is a one-time fee, non-refundable. That's what I get for my time. And if you notice, our base time for illustrations was $3,600. So we're making about $150 more, but we're giving over more rights. But also the thing that you have with a royalty contract that you don't have with your base contract is you get royalties. So my royalty percentage with most of my contracts ranges between 10 and 20%. You may decide that you're going to charge a little bit more on royalties, or you may ask for a higher advance. Just remember that the more advance you get, the less in royalty fee you'll get on the back end, because it's going to cost them more to produce the book. Now, So 10% times a net sale of $10 per book. And the reason I say a net sale is because it costs money to produce the book. So when you see the retail price, it's usually going to be about $5 to $7 difference for the net sale, because you have distribution, you have print cost, marketing, all of that is built into that fee. So 100 books sell in the next year and you make 10%, you will make a $100 royalty. Basically, you're getting $1 a book. So that's great because it's easy math. You can do it in your head. Also, not every single book sells for full retail price. So just remember that as well. A lot of them will go to wholesalers, and that is 50% off. And so you will make, per book, instead of $10 per book, you'd be making $5 per book. So that's, you'd make about $50 on 100 books sold. So just remember that the royalty is kind of like a bonus at the end of the year. You can't really plan your budget based on your royalties. So that's why the advances are really important in that business plan that I had you guys create. So let's kind of recap here. We have a base price that you can quote clients in your contracts. And then we also have a royalty, base royalty contract that you can create for your clients. It's really important that you consider having both of these in place in the beginning. It helps in quoting projects, so you don't have to go to the computer and spend hours doing research and trying to add it up and make it work. It also makes you look like a professional whenever someone comes up to you and says, hey, how much? And we'll talk about the elevator spiel in episode 4, but you will be able to rattle this off and it'll make you look like a pro. Now, with every episode, I give you guys homework, and today's homework is going to be to get your sketchbook. I want you to develop a base contract, the flat rate fee, the minimum that you would take, and then I want you to create a base royalty contract. So write these down inside your sketchbooks, and it's really important to write the formula in there too, because most times when you're out and someone sees you draw, they will ask you, hey, are you an illustrator? It's great to have that sketchbook because you can say, yes, you can. That's your portfolio. But also, if they ask you how much, you will have that formula inside your sketchbook, and you can turn to a blank sheet of paper, write it all out, and say this much. And you'll have that information on hand if they contact you again. Now, and the third thing I want you guys to do is I want you to, let me make sure I get it right here. I want you to write down 3 book festivals in your area, because this is where you will probably meet a prospective client. Now, when you write this down in your sketchbook, I want you to remember to list not only the event, but the date of the event. I want you to write down the number of authors and publishers attending the event. And then I also want you to include their website, for the event's website. I want you to look at your calendar and see if you can attend at least one of these events. And then also I want you to write down the coordinator's contact information for the event. It's really important to know that person's name. They will probably be in attendance. And if you can meet that person, they are the ones who know hundreds of publishers and authors. And it's really important as an illustrator, because if you know a few people who know loads of publishers, it's going to help you out. Now, that is your homework. I hope you guys had a great time today. And I will see you guys for episode 4. And episode 4, we are going to be talking about the elevator spiel, how to contact clients and how to follow up. It's very important that you finish your homework because you're going to be using that in episode 4. So I'll talk to you soon.